Hello and welcome to the Discover Personal Finance Lab webinar. My name is Kevin Smith. I am the Director of Personal Product Development for Personal Finance Lab. And I will be here to walk you through the basics of what the platform is, how it works, and all of the features available to you if you have your classes signed up for this fall. So I'm going to start with what Personal Finance Lab is. Personal Finance Lab, if you have not heard of it or used it before, is an online digital platform for teaching financial literacy. It consists mainly of our personal stock game, budget game, curriculum, and our teachers' support tools. So all of this works together to bring basically financial literacy concepts to life in a completely gamified platform with badges, certificates, and all kinds of stuff to encourage students to actually get ahead rather than just get through the material. So I'm going to start by logging into my teacher account here. Let's see here, which takes me to my students' dashboard. So I like to start with students' dashboard because you can kind of see what your students would see if they were to sign up for the first time. On the left here, you can see I have a list of lessons that my teacher assigned to me, along with a countdown of when it's due. So both of our games that we have, both our stock game and budget game, come with an extensive curriculum library. You can pick and choose which elements of it you want to use. Some teachers choose not to use any of it all and focus just on the games. It's completely customizable to your class. Next, I see my portfolio. So if your class is using the stock game, you will see that your students, I should say, will see their portfolio value, what they're currently holding, what their class rank is in their stock game as well. Next up, I have my stats for my budgeting game. So our budgeting game is a realistic simulation for students to learn how to manage a cash budget over the course of a simulated year. I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a minute here, but you can see I have my overall game score, how much time I have left, again my class rank, my net worth in the game, my banking balances, and all that other stuff. As I go down the page, I have some more information that helps me get familiar with the using the platform. Announcements might be messages my teacher sent to me. Currently I don't have any. We always have words of the day, so students have a little bit more to learn every time they come back to the site. My profile here with my badges, like I said, students can earn badges by completing certain tasks throughout the platform and improving their subject mastery. So I have the current badge that I have right now, which I'm showing off on all the rankings pages, and I also have the badge that I most recently earned. I got this one from completing a certain number of tutorials. There's also more information about watch lists for their stock game, transactions from the budgeting game, and all kinds of other stuff. From this point, I'm actually going to jump into the budgeting game, which is where most teachers actually begin their classes with their students. So our budgeting game, it's like I mentioned before, it's a realistic budgeting game where students need to maintain their budget over the course of a simulated year. By default, your students will start the game as a college student with a part-time job. Partway through the game, they will graduate to having a full-time job right after school. You can also configure and change how you want your students to start, and there's all kinds of settings you can use to balance it for exactly how you want to run your class. But I've already started here, and the way the game works is that I move forward through time by rolling a die. To start the game, I actually need to make a certain number of decisions. I'll be able to see the income that I'm going to earn from my jobs, when I'm going to get my next paychecks. When I'm a part-time worker, as I am here, I work a different number of hours per week, and I get a paycheck every Friday. When I'm a full-time worker, after I graduate from school, I have a steady 80 hours for every 2 weeks, so 40 hours a week paycheck that I get. That's consistent. It doesn't ever change unless I do something to improve my income. Next up, I would choose where I want to live. So students have a number of ways they can balance out the game, and this is one of the key focuses here. The balance of the game itself is based on students being able to set and hit savings goals every month, responsibly using their credit card to build their credit, and making decisions to improve their quality of life. So things like choosing where you want to live at the beginning of the game is a very clear trade-off of, do they want to choose somewhere that's kind of shabbier and a little bit less comfortable, but it's going to be easier for them to hit their savings goals, or do they want something that's a little bit nicer to live in, but that's going to make it a lot harder to hit their savings goals. So that trade-off of quality of life, where quality of life actually is an important factor that goes into their overall score, means that students can't win this game just by not ever spending money. So in this case, I'm going to go the middle route. I have a few more options I can choose too. For example, I can have a TV and internet plan, which has different expenses depending on what kind of package I get. A cell phone plan, again, different packages are available. And I have a meal plan where I choose what kind of groceries I'm going to be buying for the month. Now, all the expenses are actually deflated when the users are a part-time student because we're assuming that they have roommates. When they switch over to the full-time mode, their expenses actually go up quite a bit, and they have additional bills for health insurance and student loans, with the student loan bill being available to use optionally for your class, depending if you want to use it or not. Some CTE programs, for example, don't like students assuming that they're starting in college. It lets them go straight into the workforce. So I move forward in the game by rolling a die, which is going to move me forward half a day for every number. So I roll a 2, so I'm going to move forward 1 full day. You can see here I just got my grocery trip for the month, so I need to pay this bill. All the expenses students have in the game, they can choose to either use their debit card, which comes straight from their checking account, or they also have a credit card available. And by using their credit card, they can learn how to use their credit card responsibly. So this is a little bit much. I only have a $250 credit limit right now, and that's a lot of money to put on there. And if I use more than half of my credit limit, I actually lose credit score points. So I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to use my debit card. So it came straight out of my checking account. And then at the end of the die roll, this is my randomized event. My grocery bill, that just happens on a certain time every month. So I have the option. I can either get my oil changed now, or I can wait and put it off until later. There's all kinds of decisions students are going to make throughout the game. There's hundreds of small choices they'll make. In this case, there's 2 things that can happen. Sometimes by taking the more expensive, more luxurious options, I can do things that'll build my quality of life. Sometimes, depending on the decision that I make, this might come back to bite me later on in the game. So this one I know for a fact because I helped write this card. If I choose not to change my oil, there's a chance, it's not for sure, but there's a chance that sometime in the next 2 months I'm going to have some serious engine trouble for my car, and it's going to be quite expensive to fix it. So because I know that, I'm going to have my oil changed right now. And because it's a relatively small bill, I'm going to put this one on my credit card. So I just put something on my credit card, which means I'm using some of my credit limit for the month. One of the goals in the game is for students to build up their credit score. Now, I already mentioned that if I use more than half my credit limit, I'm going to start losing credit score points. But to gain credit score points, what I really need to do is I have to use my credit card at all. If I never use it, I'll never build my credit. But I also need to make sure I pay it off on time before the end of the month, so that students can see their credit card statements at any time. I'm going to make my payment here, and you can see my credit score actually went up because I paid off my credit card this month. As students build up their credit score, their credit limit also increases. So you see here, I just got my credit score up to 470. It was originally 300. Now my credit limit is $750, which is going to make it a lot easier for me to stay under that 50% threshold if there's some unexpected expenses I need to take care of before my next paycheck comes in. Speaking of paychecks, I'm going to move forward another couple of days, and then on this first Friday of the game, I'm going to get my first paycheck, which you can see here. So I have the hours that I worked, the base rate that I was working, and you as the teacher get to choose the base rate your students will be earning. I see all my tax withholdings, and I see my final net pay, which matches what's on my paycheck. Now, when the students are in full-time mode, of course, their paychecks are going to be much bigger. There's a few other things that figure into their paycheck. When they're working part-time as a student, they will actually work at a cafe, and they have a certain number of tips they're going to earn each week, and that amount is somewhat random. There's also bonus income. So, for example, they can have random cards that come up that say somebody else skipped a shift. They get to go in and earn a little bit more pay, and that'll be added to their bonus income. And there's game income. There's mini games that come up throughout the game that allow students to have opportunities to earn extra money. So if a student thinks that they're going to have a hard time hitting their savings goal for this month, they have the opportunity to earn a little bit extra cash in order to meet those goals. Also throughout the game, we have these lesson cards, where students actually will need to complete a short lesson in order to continue through the game. This one is one of the first lessons in the game. It's about debit and credit cards. It's a short lesson that all it really does is explain the mechanics that I've talked about here, how the debit card and credit cards work. And at the very end, there's a very short one-question quiz that they need to finish in order to move forward. And again, at the end of my roll, this one actually hit the weekend first. Every weekend in the game, the students also have an option of what they can do for the weekend. They can work extra hours. Like I mentioned, this will launch a little mini game that the students will have the opportunity to play in order to earn some extra cash. They can socialize. They can just spend time with their friends. Most of the time when they spend time with their friends, it's going to cost them money, but it's a really good way to build up their quality of life points. Household chores, most of these items are things just taking care of household chores. Some of them involve saving money. So for example, they might spend part of the weekend negotiating a discount on their next insurance bill, or pre-packing lunches, which is going to reduce their next grocery bill. And the final option here is study. Now, studying doesn't have a big impact on students when they're first starting to play the game. But when a student switches into the full-time mode of the game, if they studied a lot when they were a student, they're actually going to start with a higher income. The same thing when this game switches over to full-time mode, this becomes professional development, and students who do a lot of professional development will actually earn raises at their job. Just like the other choices the students have in the game, there's trade-offs between these, not just those points. If they don't take care of their household chores very often, eventually they're going to get events coming up of them having a cockroach infestation, or they're going to find out that they have some damage that's been done to their house that their landlord did an inspection. They're going to have a pretty expensive repairs to be made. Same thing with studying. If the student chooses not to study very often while they're in school, they're going to find that they're going to start getting events saying they failed recent tests, and they have to pay for extra tutoring in order to graduate. So I like studying, so I'm going to study, and you can see here I actually was able to save quite a bit of money because I was able to borrow a book from somebody else in my class, and I don't need to buy it out of the bookstore. So that's great. That goes straight back into my checking account. And then again, at the end of the roll, I have the option to buy a new backpack. I can either get a nice, sturdy backpack or a cheap nylon one. This is another event where there's some quality of life at play here, but also if I take the nylon bag, there's a chance it's going to break later. But I'm going to take that gamble for this one. As a student goes through the month, there's also bills that come up. So for example, I have a rent bill that I already paid earlier in this game. I actually have a fee here because I changed where I was living. Students can always change their expenses if they're having a hard time in their budget, but that means they're going to have extra fees to pay. I also have a cell phone bill, an energy bill, TV, internet bill, car insurance bill, and car payment bill. You, as the teacher, get to control all of these and how much your students need to pay for each one of them. Towards the end of the month, I will get a summary of everything I paid during the course of that month, my income and expenses, along with what my savings goal was for that month. So you can see here I only set a savings goal of $100, but as of yet I haven't hit it, so I have 0% completion on that savings goal. Setting a savings goal that students can hit that is at least 10% of their income, because we use a pay yourself first philosophy when we design the game, and making sure they actually hit that goal by the end of the month is the #1 way for students to build up their game score. They also get additional points when they can save up their first $500 and $1,000 to count as their emergency fund. So you can see here, I'm going to deposit $500 into my savings account. I got a huge boost to my game score here. But if for any reason I'm having a hard time paying my bills and I need to pull that money back out, I lose all of those points. In addition to playing the game itself, the students have access to a summary, which will show their performance over time. I actually don't have any data in here because I haven't finished the month yet, but you can see here what it looks like when I start going. I get graphs showing how my net worth, quality of life, and credit score are moving over the course of the game. I have a breakdown of where my net worth is actually coming from and going to between my assets and liabilities. I can see my quick stats just like my dashboard. And then I can also see my bank statements, or my checking account, my savings account, and my credit card. From here, I'm going to switch gears and start talking about the stock game. So Personal Finance Lab actually has a real-time stock game built into it. There's a whole ton of stuff you can use with it. There's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, even cryptocurrencies, and options contracts. You can make it as complex or as simple as you want to go. It's super easy for students to get started with it. They just need to start typing a company name, and it's going to show them the list of symbols that match it. And so it'll give them information about this company. Here's the logo. Here's a chart showing what it's been doing for the last day. If I scroll down a little bit, I have some information about who this company is and what they do. News stories that mention this company, so I can refer to this if I want an idea of why the company's price is going up or down. An analyst rating, so what's Wall Street saying about this stock? This is a good place for students to kind of take pause and check this before they make a decision. the price history. They can find the price history for any stock going all the way back to its first IPO. Financial statements. So if you're teaching an accounting class or something, you can find the income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements annually and quarterly going back 20 years for every single U.S. stock in the system. And the detailed quote will give a lot more information depending on how deep you want to get, like PE ratios, earnings per share, different time horizons for the charts of this stock's price, all kinds of things like that. When I want to trade a stock, I have my symbol already. I type how many shares I want to buy, which gives me an estimate of how much this is going to cost me. And then before I can place my trade, I need to write why I'm buying this stock. This is really important for a lot of teachers who are using the stock game to make sure students aren't just trading at random. Both the teacher and the students can refer to these later as well. Once I've placed my order, the markets are open right now, so this order would have gone through immediately. Amazon's a big company, so I'm going to go straight to my open positions, which is showing the stocks that I have in my portfolio now. You can see that Amazon stock that I just bought is here. When students are looking at their portfolio, there's a few different ways to do it. This one we call the standard view. It just lists all the stocks and different investments they're owning in order. They can see what the total value is, the profit and loss, the percent returns. If they click the little plus button, it'll actually show them a little bit more information about the company, the industry, things like that. But they can also look at this as charts. So what have these stocks done for the last day? And these are color-coded. They're going to be green if I'm making money on the stock. They're going to be red if I'm losing money on the stock. So I can see at a glance where I'm making and losing money. 30-day charts for the last month and year chart for the last year, last 12 months. I also have a pie chart showing my portfolio breakdown by the symbols, the types of industries that I'm invested in, how big are the companies I'm investing in, all kinds of things like that. And of course, for both the stock and budget game, one of the most popular parts of it is the rankings. So the rankings page has all of the students in a class with the badge that I've selected to choose that I earned. As the teacher, you have this button where you can see all the students' portfolios immediately. You also have the option, you don't have to, but you can set your class to let all of the students see each other's trades as well. A lot of teachers we work with might turn that feature on for the first couple of weeks of class and then turn it off. So when students are just getting started, they can see what each other are doing, and then once the competition gets a little bit more intense, they'll turn that off. Other reports for the stock game include the closed positions page. This is where students can see their profit and loss on trades they finished. So let's say I bought that Amazon stock and then I sold it 2 weeks from now. I'll be able to see the money I made or lost on that trade. My transaction history, I can see all the trades I ever made. I can export that to Excel. I can do whatever I like with it. My trading notes, I can see that as well. We also have a ton of tutorial videos built in, both for the stock game and budget game, to help your students get familiar with how the platform works. These tutorial videos, you can also assign them to your students using our curriculum tools for the assignments. So they'll be required to complete these as they go through the platform. So from here, I'm going to talk a little bit more from the teacher's perspective. So I'm going to jump over and look at my assignments tool. Because in order to look at the curriculum, it actually helps to look at the teacher's view so I can see everything all in one place. So if I go over to my assignments, I'm going to create a new assignment. And the way assignments work is that you're going to pick the stuff you want your students to do in any time horizon. So next 24 hours, next week, next month. Most teachers create their assignments weekly. So I'll call this my week 1 assignment. For every assignment, you can set the start dates and times and the end dates and times. You can use what's called a prerequisite. A prerequisite is before a student can do this assignment, they must do the last one. So one example you might do for that is instead of having your assignments due 1 week after another, you might say students can go through things at any pace they want to, but they'll have to finish assignment 1 before they start assignment 2, and they have to finish assignment 2 before they start assignment 3. So the prerequisite is another assignment the student needs to finish before they can start this one. You can also give rewards. The rewards, you can give cash money to the student's stock game or budget game. So when the student finishes this assignment, they get this cash added to their account. There's even some teachers we've worked with that say the students actually start their stock game with no money in their account. The students have to finish their first assignment learning about all the stuff about the stock market before they get the cash to actually start investing. Otherwise, the type of lessons that we have in our curriculum, the first type is articles, where it's called read article. These also usually have some short kind of video embedded into it. We use a lot of infographics, images, text, and then it always ends with a pop quiz. The pop quizzes attached to our lessons are between 3 and 5 lessons long. They are not designed to be tricky. They're just really designed to test, did the student read this subject, read this lesson. The next type of assignment we have are watch videos. Watch videos are really tutorials teaching students how to use PersonalFinanceLab. And we always recommend teachers assign these tutorial videos pretty early in the semester, right as students are getting into PersonalFinanceLab for the first time, so they're going to understand how the different parts work. Next, we have our calculators. So we have items called activity, use calculator. And I have one here called the home budgeting calculator. This is a tool where students can put in a bunch of different settings and see how these kinds of items stack up when it comes to building a budget. Or we have one that illustrates compound interest, or another retirement planning calculator showing how much they need to save per month in order to retire with $1 million by the time they turn 65. The way these lessons work is we give students a scenario, and they need to use that calculator to find the correct answer for those scenarios. We also have in our mathematics section several activities that utilize spreadsheets. So these spreadsheet lessons require students to get data from their PersonalFinanceLab portfolio or budgeting game, and then use that to conduct different types of activities. So making graphs, or really just how do you get the information from PersonalFinanceLab into a spreadsheet, calculating daily returns, or calculating profits and losses, those kinds of things. The next type we have is in our Investing 101 course. Our Investing 101 course, instead of it being one lesson and a short quiz at the end, there's about 10 on average mini lessons that talk about some smaller subject. And then at the end of the 10 lessons, there is both a very short vocabulary exam and a longer chapter exam that covers everything in that chapter. And finally, there's just stuff you want your students to do in the game. So for the budget game, you can say, I want you to study a certain number of times, or I want you to use your credit card a certain number of times, or I want you to finish a certain number of months. In the stock game, you can say, I want you to make a certain number of trades, or certain types of trades. So all of those are things that you can assign to your students for every class. The other parts for the administration side, let me go quickly through some of the reports you have available. So how many trades, or how many students do I register to my class would be the summary report. The activity report will show you how often you have students logging in and actually making activities in the stock game. The diversification report would be showing your class's breakdown of how are we investing in stocks and mutual funds, or are we just everybody's holding cash. Ranking report. This is like the student's ranking report, but it's even more detailed. You as the teacher can dive in and see everything there is to see about any student's portfolio. You can also give them free cash or take cash out of their account if they've done something inappropriate in class, for example. You can see a chart showing their portfolio over time, and you can even reset students back to their starting position. You can also look back in time to see their rankings or at any time of your class, but I would say most teachers spend most of the time on this report here called the registration file. The registration file report is one that will show you all the students in your class. You as the teacher can send them a message, which will appear in their inbox on PersonalFinanceLab. You can edit this student to change their username or email address. Some classes don't have any email addresses at all. You can reset the password of this user, or if there's somebody who shouldn't be in your class at all, you can use this button to kick them out. As the teacher, there's a couple different ways to get your students in the platform. You can have them create their own accounts, and as of this semester, we also support single sign-on with Clever and various LMS systems. And with that system, the student basically picks their own username. Or from this registration file, you can just say, I need 10 accounts. So my high school mascot is Knights, and I'm going to get 10 accounts. And the system will give me a series of usernames and passwords to give my students. If your school uses Clever, your students can first sign in with this generated username and password, and then connect it to their Clever account for single sign-on going forward. You can also see all the stats for what your students have done in your class's budget game. And there's one last one I want to highlight really quick here, which is called the Teams report. This is a feature of the stock game where you can put your students into teams for the stock game saying, I want 6 of my students to share a portfolio. So all of your students still have their own trades. You can still see what every individual student contributed to the group, but it's going to group all their portfolios together into one aggregate portfolio for them to use for the class rankings. Very quickly, I'm going to go to create a new challenge just to point out some of the other rules that I didn't get to here. I'm going to skip through a lot of these rules real quick. I'm going to give every class a name, a number of participants, registration dates. If we have forums built in, you can choose whether or not your students want to be able to see those forums. Some teachers just don't think their students should have that ability, so we give the option to turn it off. I mentioned students can earn badges earlier. Some teachers also want the option to turn those off, which we have the option to do so. And you can even have your students earn participation certificates. So there's a certificate, a PDF certificate your students will have generated that they can print off with their name and accomplishment on it. There's one for completing our entire Investing 101 course, and there's a separate one for completing all of our financial literacy lessons. I'm going to turn both of those on here. For the budgeting game, like I said, you get to control everything. So how long does it last? How many months of the game can the students play? The speed limit is how fast your students can go through the game. So you might be able to say that I only want my students to do 2 months of the game per week. They can't go any faster than that. Do you want your students to start as a part-time student or a full-time worker? How long do you want them to each game scenario? How much money they start with? How much money they earn in their jobs? What's the income tax they're paying? All of these things can be chosen for your class. You can also emphasize certain types of events to happen during those random events of the game. At the bottom here, we actually show you the summary of what this is actually going to look like for your students. When we first set up the budget game, we had a lot of teachers that had their students with realistic expenses and earning minimum wage, and all the students went bankrupt immediately. So we decided to show exactly what the breakdown is with the settings that you chose for your class. Next, for the stock game, we have a ton of different settings here. If you've not seen a stock game before, you might be familiar with some of these. Some you probably haven't seen is starting cash. How much money do you want your students to start out with? $100,000 used to be the standard, but more and more teachers are starting with $1,000 or $10,000 to make it a little bit more realistic for students. Because if you're telling students you need to have $100,000 to start investing, that means they're never really going to invest. Another way you can do this is saying you're going to start with $1,000, and then every week of the game, I have a weekly deposit of $500. So this acts more like an accelerated retirement account, where the student will start with $1,000, and every week they're getting another $500 to need to reinvest. You can give your students interest on cash, like a savings account. They can borrow money. Can they day trade? Can they short sell? Do you want minimum prices? Making portfolios public is one of the settings that I mentioned earlier. Do you want your students to be able to see each other's trades? You also can choose what they can trade. So do they need to have a note every time they place a trade? We recommend doing that, yes. Stocks, do you want them to have cryptocurrencies or not? Mutual funds and bonds are in most classes, but maybe you have some students who are interested in options or maybe in Forex. We have over 30 different countries available for trading as well. So I'm going to just turn on basically everything for my class. I would recommend not turning everything on if your class is giving some sort of price, because we use real-time prices for the United States, but some of the other countries we use end-of-day pricing. And if students really want to win, they might be able to use a different data source to get a bit of an advantage over the other students. And then the last step of creating your class is to basically, again, choose those lessons that you want as your first assignment. You can always add more assignments later. Once your class is set up, you'll get a link to give your students to get them into their class, or you can generate students as I showed you earlier. So that's a very quick rundown of all the stuff that is in PFinLab. We get a lot of questions normally asking about things like our standards alignment of our curriculum. We do extensively align our standards with both state and national standards. You can find more information about our curriculum and our standards alignment by going to our homepage, go to our platform, and the financial literacy curriculum. You'll find links off talking about the standards alignment for our various states on that page there. You can also find more information about our stock game or budgeting game here. If you want to take a test drive for yourself and log in with a teacher account and see how or a student account and see how it all works, right up here, the free teacher test drive. This is for teachers to preview everything from a student's perspective. We also have live chat on most of the pages to answer your questions. And you can request more information or a quote at any time from basically any of our sales pages as a form you can submit. So that's our half hour. I want to thank everyone who is in attendance and whoever requested the recordings. But that is it for today. So thank you very much for joining.